The American Revolution. We all know the story, right? A heroic fight for freedom, liberty, and justice against a tyrannical British Empire. Paul Revere's Ride the Shot heard round the world. Washington crossing the Delaware. It's a powerful narrative, one that defines the United States. But what if I told you the story we learn in school is missing its most important chapter? What if the revolution wasn't just won on the battlefield with muskets and ideals, but in the back rooms of European banks with ledgers and loans? Because the uncomfortable truth is, America didn't just fight for its independence. It bought it on credit. Let's rewind to 1775. The colonies declare their intentions, but they have a huge problem. They're broke. Utterly, completely broke. They have no unified treasury, no way to collect taxes, and the currency they print, the Continental, is becoming worthless faster than they can make it. The Continental Army, the very force meant to win this war, is starving. Soldiers are freezing, deserting, and on the brink of mutiny, not for lack of courage, but for lack of food, boots, and pay. By all conventional logic, the revolution should have collapsed within a year or two. So why didn't it? The answer lies across the Atlantic, in the capitals of Europe's great powers. In Paris, Madrid, and Amsterdam, the American rebellion wasn't seen as a noble cause for liberty. It was seen as a golden opportunity. For centuries, France and Spain had been locked in a bitter global rivalry with Great Britain. They'd lost wars, territory, and prestige to the British. Now, this colonial uprising offered them a perfect, low-cost way to strike a devastating blow against their enemy without having to declare an all-out war themselves. It was a classic case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Or more accurately, the enemy of my enemy is a fantastic investment. So, the American Revolution quietly transformed from a domestic rebellion into a high-stakes geopolitical venture. It became a proxy war, funded from the shadows. The French were the first and most crucial investors. Through secret channels and covert operations, they began funneling money, gunpowder, weapons, and uniforms to the desperate American cause. We often hear about Lafayette, the French nobleman who fought alongside Washington. He's the heroic face of the alliance. But the real saviors were the French accountants and diplomats who approved the loans that kept the Continental Army from disintegrating. Spain, another of Britain's rivals, joined in. They saw a chance to weaken British naval power and potentially reclaim lost territories like Florida and Gibraltar. Spanish silver and supplies began flowing into the colonies, particularly through the port of New Orleans. Then there were the Dutch. The Dutch Republic was the financial center of the 18th century world. Their bankers didn't care about American liberty. They cared about profit. They saw a fledgling nation desperate for cash and turned the American rebellion into an emerging credit market. They issued bonds, took on risk, and provided the hard currency that America desperately needed to buy supplies on the international market. Every cannon fired, every ship outfitted, every soldier fed during the bleak winter at Valley Forge was made possible by this lifeline of foreign cash. While Washington was leading the troops, a different kind of war was being waged by men you've probably never heard of. Financiers like Robert Morris, often called the financier of the Revolution, worked tirelessly behind the scenes. He was a master of leveraging his personal credit and international connections to secure those crucial European loans. He juggled debts, brokered secret deals, and essentially willed a financial system into existence where there was none. Alongside him was Haym Salomon, a Polish-born Jewish broker who became a key financial agent for the revolutionary government. He personally extended massive interest-free loans to the cause and converted the French loans into the ready cash needed to pay the soldiers. At one critical moment before the decisive Battle of Yorktown, Washington's army was on the verge of mutiny over lack of pay. It was Salomon who frantically raised the $20,000 in hard currency needed to pay the troops and keep the army together for the final push. So when we see that famous painting of the British surrender at Yorktown, we see the American and French armies standing victorious. What we do unsee are the invisible threads of debt and credit stretching all the way back to Paris, Madrid, and Amsterdam. The victory wasn't just military, it was financial. The revolution had been saved by foreign investment. But here's the thing about debt. It always comes due. When the war ended in 1783, America was free. It was also drowning in debt. The new nation owed staggering sums to France, to Spain, and to Dutch bankers. Its own citizens who had bought war bonds were also demanding to be paid. This wasn't just an accounting problem. It was an existential crisis. European creditors weren't patient. They wanted to see a stable American government capable of generating revenue and guaranteeing repayment. If the U.S. defaulted, its reputation would be ruined, and it would be cut off from all future credit, leaving it vulnerable and isolated. This immense financial pressure is what truly shaped the early United States. The fierce debates over the Constitution weren't just about political philosophy. They were about creating a government strong enough to tax its citizens and pay its bills. When Alexander Hamilton, as the first Secretary of the Treasury, proposed his famous financial plan assuming all state debts into one national debt and creating a national bank, he was not just being a brilliant economist, he was performing emergency surgery on a bankrupt nation. His goal was simple: establish credibility with European lenders. He knew that if America was to survive and prosper, it had to prove to the world that it paid its debts. This had immediate and violent consequences at home. To raise the money to pay back those foreign loans, Hamilton's government imposed new federal taxes. One of the most famous was a tax on whiskey. For farmers on the western frontier, whiskey wasn't just a drink. It was a form of currency and their main way to get their grain to market. They saw the tax as a betrayal by a distant government, much like the British taxes they had just fought to escape. The result was the Whiskey Rebellion, an armed uprising that had to be put down by the very army it had once helped to fund. America's first major internal crisis wasn't about ideology. It was a direct result of the financial hangover from the Revolution. The nation's foreign policy was also dictated by its balance sheet. When revolutionary France went to war with the rest of Europe in the 1790s, many Americans felt a duty to help their former ally. But Washington and Hamilton knew the country was too fragile. Its finances couldn't possibly survive another war. So, America declared neutrality, angering the French, but saving itself from financial ruin. The country was free, but it was a freedom constrained by the realities of its debt. So what's the takeaway from all of this? It's that the clean, heroic story of the American Revolution is a myth. The reality is far more complex and far more modern. The Revolution was a business deal. It was an investment. Empires funded it to weaken other empires. Financiers got rich from it, and the new nation that emerged was born with a burden of debt that shaped its destiny for decades. This pattern didn't end in the 18th century. It's a timeless story of money, power, and the hidden mechanics of global conflict. Think about it. Today, when we see smaller nations fighting against larger powers, how often is their resistance secretly bankrolled by a rival superpower? It happens all the time. Major powers still finance foreign conflicts from the shadows to achieve their goals without risking their own soldiers. They use economic aid, loans, and weapons sales as tools of foreign policy. The American Revolution was simply one of the earliest and most successful examples of this strategy. It's a powerful reminder that history isn't just made by soldiers and statesmen, but also by bankers and investors, and that even the most noble of revolutions must, in the end, be financed. Thanks for watching. If you found this hidden side of history fascinating, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that change the way you see the world. See you next time.